What's up guys, I'm Dylan Matthew, and this is Blueeyeswhitedude. And in today's list video, I'm talking about the complete opposite of my first list video, which you can check out using the card above after you've watched this one, as well as future list videos once they're up. And today is all about 10 cards that I used to think were not competitively viable, but either always were or have become good. So let's jump into the first card. Now the first card on this list is currently banned, mainly because it doesn't have a once per turn clause on it. That card is Mass Driver, whose effect reads, tribute one monster on your side of the field to inflict 400 points of damage to your opponent's life points. If you don't think too much about it, that seems pretty underwhelming, considering you're getting rid of one of your monsters to inflict only 400 burn damage. But like I said earlier, this effect is not even a soft once per turn, making the infinite loop possibilities ever so prevalent with this card. Until the meta got really special summon heavy, Mass Driver wasn't a problem, since you couldn't just continuously spit out tribute fodder for its effect, which is why, as a scrub, I didn't see why this card needed to be banned. It wasn't until a frog deck used it with Substitoad and Ronin Toadin to summon every monster in their deck, and in one turn, OTK your opponent with burn damage alone. Now this next card has basically flown under my radar forever, even up until recently. I only know it sees play nowadays due to watching various Yugi tubers talk about how even though it's a weaker version of some banned cards, it's still played pretty heavily in tournaments. That card is a pointer of the Red Lotus, a trap card that reads, pay 2,000 life points and reveal all cards in your hand. Look at your opponent's hand and select one card. Remove that card from play until your opponent's next end phase. Now, for this card to see competitive play, the payoff must be pretty strong, considering you not only have to pay a quarter of your starting life points, but you have to show your opponent your hand. I never gave this card a thought since it seemed like too much hassle for not enough payoff. Plus, it's a trap card, meaning that you have to set it first. Considering this card sees play, it's no wonder cards like Delinquent Duo are considered some of the most broken cards to ever have been printed. The next card on the list is a card that could have always been broken, just like Mass Driver, but never had a meta deck to abuse it with, until just recently. That card is Smoke Grenade of the Thief, an equip spell card that reads, when this card is destroyed by a card effect while equipped to a monster, look at your opponent's hand and discard one card from their hand. No once per turn, not limited to your opponent destroying it, and since it's an equip spell, there are other shenanigans you can get into with this card. I never even knew this card existed until recently, with it just being banned as of writing this script. Hand destruction and information about your opponent's hand is extremely valuable in Yu-Gi-Oh!, and it always has been, but Smoke Grenade never saw play until Infernoble Knights started being part of the meta just this year. It was just one of those old school unassuming cards that I never looked twice at. Now, our first monster card on this list is one that was always ripe for infinite loops due to not having a once per turn clause. That card is Samsara Lotus, whose effect reads, during your end phase, if you control no spell or trap cards, you can special summon this card from your graveyard in face-up attack position. This card's controller takes 1,000 damage during each of their standby phases. Now, for years, this card was referred to as a worse Treeborn Frog due to more restrictions and being summoned at your end phase instead of your standby phase like Treeborn. It wasn't until Link Monsters came out that an infinite loop OTK was discovered using Samsara Lotus along with Topologic Bomber Dragon and a couple other cards that I can't quite remember. I never gave this card a second thought, and can now understand why, without some sort of errata, this card should stay banned. The next spell card on this list is one that I've known about forever and did occasionally use in some casual duels with friends or siblings, but never thought it was overpowered since I never used it in decks that could abuse it. And that card is Foolish Burial, whose very simple effect reads, send one monster card from your deck to the graveyard. In old school Yu-Gi-Oh, this card was still pretty good, but not too crazy since you could use it with stuff like Call of the Haunted and Monster Reborn, but ever since the graveyard was basically considered a second hand, Foolish Burial became even better and will only get better over time. It's currently limited in the TCG, but I wouldn't be surprised if one day the game became so graveyard-centric that it just straight up got banned. The next card on this list is one of the most eroded cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, having a total of 7 effect changes. It's also considered one of the best field spell cards ever printed due to it just getting better over time. That card is Necro Valley, whose current effect reads, all Gravekeeper's monsters gain 500 attack and defense. Cards in the graveyard cannot be banished. Negate any card effect that would move a card in the graveyard to a different place. Negate any card effect that changes types or attributes in the graveyard. So remember what I said about the whole graveyard being like a second hand? Well, this card throws that out the window. The only thing keeping this card from being overpowered and broken is that it doesn't have any inherent protection or floating effect. I never thought this card was that good back in the day, considering it was a different effect back then, and the fact that graveyards weren't as important when I discovered it. It's actually very good in Duel Links, where I used to have a pretty decent Gravekeepers deck that actually could protect Necro Valley using other cards. The next card on the list, even though it's considered one of the strongest trap cards of all time, I used to not think was good. After all, paying half your life points to activate a card effect seemed too steep to play at the time. That's right. The card I'm talking about is Solemn Judgment, whose effect reads, when a monster would be summoned or a spell or trap card is activated, pay half your life points, negate the summon or activation, and if you do, destroy that card. It wasn't until recently that I learned that life points don't matter too much, at least until your last one, as long as you use your cards at the right time to stop your opponent from doing anything. And boy, does Solemn Judgment stop just about anything. The card's name should just be No with that versatility. Judgment was actually banned at one point for the longest time, and currently is unlimited. Considering its age, it must be a powerful card to still see play in the metagame. Now, speaking of me thinking life points meant the world in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the next spell card on this list has the downside of giving your opponent life points, which, in retrospect, is not too much of a downside at all, but back in the day, I thought so. That card is Upstart Goblin, whose effect reads, draw 1 card, then your opponent gains 1,000 life points. Now, this card is currently limited to 1 in the TCG, and for a good reason, since it's a spell card and not a trap card like Jar of Greed, who is unlimited and sees no play. Upstart Goblin is basically like having a 37-card deck instead of 40, just because it's essentially a free draw as soon as you have it in your hand, considering you don't have to set spells. Back in the day, I didn't realize how minor the downside was for the effect just to dig deeper into your deck to get to your combo pieces. The only reason this card isn't banned is that you don't gain card advantage from it. You just go hand neutral, as you need to get rid of this card to draw 1. Now, the next entry has been on and off the TCG's Forbidden and Limited list a few times due to certain changes in which cards are coming from the OCG to the TCG. Any card that could possibly abuse this monster's recursion ability has caused it to be restricted in some way, but I never thought it was that good due to it being a very rare once per duel effect. That card is Glowup Bulb, whose effect reads, if this card is in your graveyard, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card. You can only use this effect of Glowup Bulb once per duel. Now, in theory, this card is very similar to Plague Spreader Zombie, in that you can send a card somewhere else to summon it from the graveyard. The thing is, Glowup Bulb can do this in a better way by milling a card that could potentially have a graveyard effect as well. This card is also a level 1 tuner monster, making it very versatile in almost any deck. But the reason this card is currently banned after just coming off the ban list is a little card called Crystron Halki Fibrax, a link monster that benefits heavily from tuner monsters. Glowup Bulb itself is a decent card, but just the fact that there are so many other cards that can abuse its abilities and typing makes it just good enough to be forbidden. The final card on this list is a pretty old quick play spell card that has seen tons of play throughout its history, although recently, because of link monsters, had to be limited due to its text not really being future-proofed for other types of summons besides tribute summons. That card is Scapegoat, whose effect reads, special summon 4 sheep tokens, beast, type, earth, level 1, 0 attack, 0 defense, in defense position. These tokens cannot be tributed for a tribute summon. You cannot summon other monsters the turn you activate this card, but you can set. Now, the last clause there is the only reason that this card is not banned currently, in my opinion, since you can't immediately use these tokens for extra deck plays. I used to think it was basically just a clog to your field and nothing else. In the past, Scapegoat saw play mainly to get 4 bodies on the field to block 4 attacks. Now that Link monsters can easily use tokens to be summoned, Scapegoat is a whole lot more useful. Being a quick play spell is just the icing on the versatility cake. That's it for my time, guys. Remember to like the video, subscribe if you're new here to become a scrub-scriber, because that's what I call all of my subscribers, all 7 of you currently. And comment down below any cards you used to think were bad, but either aren't now or just never were bad. And I will see you guys next week.